Okay, good morning, all my participants. Thank you so much for being with us here. I know like the whole week is also in front of the laptop with work from homes and Zoom calls and WebEx calls. And on a Saturday also, we are expecting you to do the same. But still, thank you for taking out time. While other participants join, we have a few more registrations. And being a Saturday, I want to be a little lenient and I'm hoping they will join a little late. Let's start with the session. I'll quickly introduce our speakers and then a little introduction to the topic, and then I'll hand it over. I will not bore you much because you see me pretty much every month, so my voice may be very boring for you guys already. So I'll not take more than 60 seconds to do all of this. So we have Ashay. Ashay is a good friend. He holds a doctorate in the field of information systems from Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He has extensively pursued research on understanding management approaches adopted by software teams to succeed with agile methodologies. So that's what brings me and Ashay together on the friendship platform, because we have similar passions and similar likes and dislikes and similar frustrations about the so-called agile organizations. We share the same thoughts there. He has conducted in-depth case studies at global MNCs like Intel, GE, Mindtree, and ThoughtWorks. So don't forget to pick his brain on these ones as well. If we get some time, we could actually ask him to share some of those thought process as well, which has gone into his doctorate research. He has delivered talks as well and presented plenty of research papers, both on national and international conferences like Australian Conference of Information Systems, ACM Computers, and People Research Conferences. And of course, he's a regular in the Agile India Summits, Agile Leadership Summits. You must have seen him and heard him before. Right now, he works with IBM as a business transformation consultant. And then we have Deanna. Warm welcome, Ashay. And then we have Deanna Spowart. I think I'm pronouncing your name correct, Deanna?
Is perfectly, perfectly, Padma.
Okay. Thank you. So Deanna started her career as a certified practicing accountant, working in finance and technology roles in organizations like BHP, Bilton, BP, Brambers, and PwC. She spent several years working in London, Europe, USA. She's like a global child, actually, right, Deanna?
Yes.
And Chile as well. One of the places I have never been, South America. So I think that's a place of my choice. Whenever things open up, I need to get there. So Chile before returning home to Australia. So right now, Australia is her home. Deanna was first introduced to Agile back in 2010, more than a decade now, right, Deanna? Working for Telstra and led her IT people and culture strategy. She has been immersed in culture, leadership, performance, talent, capability, and diversity and inclusion. Deanna is one of the lead researchers on reimagining agile and diversity and equity and inclusion, the paper that we are going to be speaking here today. We warm welcome, Deanna, to you as well to this forum. We have Gautam, who is going to be he's going to share some very practical thoughts. He is the APAC head for talent acquisition and employer branding at Maersk. Coming from, he has over a decade or a decade and a half experience being in the HR space, in all spaces of HR, right, Gautam? And yes. So he can bring in a lot of value on this topic from a very practical perspective. So what we are doing in this talk is, while we are going to present a lot of research, data, and study, which is again from the practitioners itself. So there is a lot of pragmatic study data there. But at the same time, we are going to be picking Gautam's thought process here on asking some of the data points that he sees on a day-to-day basis from his capacity as the APAC head for the talent acquisition, where he sees how hiring in the DE&I space typically happens. So that's what Gautam is going to bring to the table. So what is this? Warm welcome to you, Gautam. So what is this talk all about? I'm going to leave it to the three of them because they are the experts in this space, but a quick two-liners on this. It's going to focus on finding from a year-long BI research. BI is Business Agility Institute research work, where Ashay and Deanna were part of it, on how agile organizations are harnessing the power of DEI. That's the point. And what is that you're going to take away as participants? A holistic perspective of the field, as well as gaining actionable insights that can be implemented in your work settings. And Gautam is going to add a little more points from a day-to-day practical perspective on this as well for us. And Deanna herself also comes from a HR and HR space, and Ashay coming from business. We have a pretty much a holistic merge here from the speakers itself. So I'll hand it over to them, not take away too much time from their time. So over to you, Deanna and Ashay to begin with, and then we will bring in Gautam at some at intervals to pick his thoughts as well. So let's go ahead. Thank you for being here, speakers, taking your time on a Saturday. And I know for Deanna, it's like almost half a day of Saturday is gone already. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, over to you.
Yep. Thanks for the warm introductions, Padma. And yeah, I think without taking any much time, let us get started. The presentation will take anywhere between 30-35 minutes. But if there are any questions, please feel free to put it on the chat, and we are very happy to take them as well. So again, let me set the stage in terms of what this research was all about and what we were trying to achieve. Again, I think a lot of you here on the call must be familiar with Agile in terms of what it brings to the table. It has been around since the last 2 decades, so it has been quite a while since Agile has been with us. But what we were interested in seeing was the entire discourse on DEI, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, which has picked up a lot of pace in the last year or so. I mean, there have been a lot of incidents that have also come to the forefront. For example, the George Floyd incident in US that happened last year. There was a lot of noise around, I mean, whether all lives matter, is there any specific race that should be looked at. So again, these are all communications that started around that time. Again, a lot of media articles as well. And the attention is only growing since we are all living in this virtual world where pretty much we're all connected through these Zoom calls or these WebEx calls that we have right now. So then, are we doing enough as Agile organizations? Are we doing enough to welcome the DEI perspective or not? That was the whole basis behind this entire research exercise. And what we're going to do in the next half an hour is take you through the entire process, what we did, how we did, and of course, the findings and recommendations that we have from our report. So again, a quick disclaimer to begin with, this report is not about any specific organization. We're not talking about an organization, a community, or a specific place. We have researched organizations globally. We have spoken to more than 400 individuals. So we have tried to synthesize a lot of this. And as we go through this presentation, you will hear what were the participants like, what was the diversity of participants that we are talking about. So that's a quick disclaimer before we begin. Now, coming to the agenda, what you can see on your screen, here is the flow of the presentation. We'll start with setting the stage in terms of what the research process was all about, and then we are going to deep dive into our findings, recommendations around what are the key takeaways for all of you who have joined us for this very important session. So I'm going to hand it over to Deanna to take us through the research, what the key terms and examples were before I start to discuss more on the findings and recommendation side.
Thank you, Ashay. So firstly, thank you everyone for giving up some time on Saturday to come and hear about this topic. The research actually started, interestingly, when the founder of the Business Agility Institute, Evan Laybourne, went along to a talk given by Mark Green. And Mark was talking about his not so great experiences in Agile organisations. This really surprised Evan, who was such an advocate of Agile. And so he even decided to set up the research project, and Mark became a project manager / Scrum Master, of which Ashay and I were both lead participants in. So we actually had 2 hypotheses that are on screen. So we said that, look, despite Agile, we think it's all wonderful and great, we're actually at risk of further marginalising people. And secondly, that we believe that organisations who did actually embrace Agile, diversity, equity, inclusion, that would actually help them become more profitable and better results for them. And in summary, we found both to be true. So number one, we found that actually Agile is, unfortunately, for people in the minority, people are being excluded. And that's not only staff or your employees, that's also contractors and also customers. And number two, we are finding that leaders and individuals do believe if their organisation is intentionally embedding DE&I, I will be referring to the acronym, diversity, equity, inclusion, into their organisations, then they are finding benefits, and we're going to share a lot of those. So stay tuned. So firstly, just some more definitions. I'm just going to cover off the approach that we took. So at the Business Agility Institute, they talk about business agility is all about putting the customer at the center of everything that an organization does. So this is talking about your ways of working, the behaviors, the capability you need to exist in order to serve the customer. So this can be applying any framework you want, whether it's Agile, Lean, systems thinking, Scrum, Safe, Extreme, whatever there is, it's all encompassing of that framework. And then when we look at the definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion, then that's all about what organisations actually do to create and maintain an environment that is welcoming and supportive for all. So if we think about those two definitions, the obvious thing that we started to think about was, well, hang on, they look like it's actually really, really connected here. So this was something that was quite surprising to a lot of participants, that they had not really thought about it before then. The next thing that I wanted to do is just talk to you about the definitions that we used in our research. So really importantly, diversity for us is the mix of people. So it's our backgrounds, our experiences, our identities, our perspectives, and more. And inclusion is all about welcoming the mix of diversity into your organisation for the purpose of this research. If we talk about equality and equity, these are two sort of different terms, very connected. So you can see from the diagram on the left that equality is all about giving everyone access to the same resources. So we've all made an assumption that everyone will benefit in the same way if they get the same support. However, what equity does, and it's very clearly demonstrated here, is that it's about levelling the playing field. It's about giving extra assistance or resources to those people who need it, and in order to sort of apply a structure of fairness so that people, we can have those different voices at the table. So it's really important that equity is such a key enabler to inclusion and diversity for what you see in your organisation in order to get those different mix of voices into those discussions. Next is going to be some stats for you about who we interviewed and got survey results from. So you can see there's a lot of different dimensions to diversity. It's both visible and invisible. So just some key ones, otherwise I'll be here forever if I read everything out. But from a gender perspective, we actually we had 49% women, 47% men, and 1.5% identified as non-binary. From a language perspective, we had 47% of people spoke one language, but actually 50% of participants spoke 2 or more languages, which I'm going to guess is probably nearly everyone on this call except for me, who's an only English speaker, unfortunately. From the countries of residence, we actually had a large chunk of people. 39% was from Australia, 20% was from North America, and 19% from Asia, 15% from Europe, 4% of Africa, and then we had a group that just didn't want to tell us where they were from. We gave everyone the option to declare their identity or not, and we were very comfortable that a lot of people chose not to. And the other interesting stat that I'll leave you with as well, which is often not talked about in diversity and inclusion, is around religion. So we actually found that a large chunk of people decided not to tell us, so 17% didn't want to divulge. We had 42% of people who were atheist, interesting in itself, 25% Christian, 9% Hindu, 3% Muslim, 2% Jewish, 2% Buddhist, 1% Sikh, and then there was a group of other types of religions in there. So in terms of these dimensions of diversity, this was actually not only an education for the people who participated in our survey results, this was actually an education for our research team. And you can see that there is a whole lot of different elements that goes into the diversity of thought. And now Ashay is going to go into the research findings.
So coming to the key findings, as you can see, we have this cut across the 5 pillars over here. The first one, as Deanna hinted on the very first slide, the research did challenge our beliefs. It did challenge our beliefs around that just the fact that Agile is more inclusive and equitable than what has come before. Yes, that is true. Yet, if you look at the stats very closely, 17%, 17% of the participants said that they witnessed exclusion and inequity within their organizations. And around 26% believe that Agile itself could promote this exclusion and inequity, the way it has been defined, the way practices are. The second key pillar that we had was more around agile transformations, which is something pretty much every organization deals with in one way or the other. That is where we found that ways of working are often not designed with DEI in mind. So if you look at the key percentages here, there are around 11% methods, only 11% methods that build product services consciously designing for DEI. And we only have 19% of these ways of working which are consciously designed for inclusion and equity. So this 11% and 19% is definitely on the lower side. We anticipated this to be, say, upwards of 50%. That is when we can say that ways of working are designed with DEI in mind. Coming to the third lever that we had, which was more around bias and microaggression, that yes, there are these instances that persist in agile organizations. There were a lot of personal stories that came out from people where they spoke about how they felt working in an agile organization, what was the experience like working in these organizations. In fact, I will be sharing it with all of you as we go through the next few slides, the personal stories of what people had to tell us. The fourth vertical we had was more around psychological safety, that if we are working in an environment where there's lack of trust and psychological safety, then that does have startling impact on the employee well-being. And finally, the last lever we were looking at was whether DEI can be aligned to business strategy. And there were some organizations that were intentionally aligning the two. And obviously the results were there to be seen. There were better products, better services, the customers were more happy, and also the communities they were serving they gained a lot of respect in those communities. So these are the 5 broad findings that I want to talk about. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to deep dive into that third lever that we have on this slide and share some of the personal stories to talk about how people start to feel excluded and marginalized when they work in agile organizations. So again, here we have a set of quotes that we want to take you through. The first one that you're seeing on your screen is again very startling in the sense that there are people with these visual impairments or the disabilities that we're talking about, and they came out and said that, look, we feel intimidated by Agile. And again, it's not just about people with a very visual disability, but also just the fact that speed of work in agile organizations is such, the expectation is faster time to market, responding to customer whenever there's any change that comes through. That means it may not work well with a certain section of employees. For example, the older employees, those who have a disability, as you can see in this quote, or people with neurodiversity, or the fact that who are just new to agile ways of working. People who have been looking at other ways of working suddenly are in this fast-paced environment that they need to deal with. Here is another quote that I want to spend some time on, where quite clearly what you can see is here is a participant who is not able to practice the religious beliefs that he or she comes with. It's very startling again in the sense that, here is someone's religious belief and they do want to pray 5 times in a day, but does the agile workspaces afford them that kind of a freedom or that kind of a luxury? Now, again, we might say that, look, are we designing agile workspaces to cater to a certain section? Maybe, maybe not. But here's a very candid quote from someone who outrightly said that, look, it's difficult for me to practice my religious beliefs when I am in an agile workspace. And again, this one is something, again, I also have a personal story attached to it. But again, this is something that I'm sure a lot of you can relate to. The way the agile has been designed, just the fact it is very on the spot and who can talk. There are these time box meetings and there's a clear agenda for each of these meetings where people need to speak up and their opinion. So in fact, I deal with a lot of agile delivery teams in my current role. And quite often there are participants that come up to me after meetings are concluded saying that, hey, Ashay, I have a better idea of how this can be executed. And I'm like, why couldn't you tell this during the meeting? And a lot of them are, hey, look, at that time I was just processing all the information, trying to get a handle of, what was going on in the meeting. It's only now, 2 hours after the meeting is over, I feel that, I have a very strong input on how things need to be done. A very valid statement from someone who is very passionate about the work. But the big question mark here is, does Agile afford that kind of a luxury where people can think through a certain situation, process the information, and then come up with their opinion? So that's something that we found, and this quote is an example of that, where people just feel that, they are being rushed into expressing an opinion so that, they can just gel with the group that they're working with. The next one, again, this is more, we are going back to the visible disability element. Now, and I think this is where we need to take a step back and think how we look at individuals who come with visible disability. The element around that, all of us do sympathize with people, in the sense that, yes, if someone if someone has a problem in, say, walking, we do try and make sure how that person can be accommodated, how a wheelchair can be arranged, how a workspace can be aligned in a way that the person can move around freely. But all of that at times goes into the bucket of sympathizing with the person rather than empathizing with the person. What I mean by empathizing with the person is to tell the person, to go to the person and tell him or her that, hey, you know what, at some level, I can understand what you are going through. At some level, I can see through what are your struggles when you are coming to work and trying to do your thing. And this is how I feel that, things can be done so that, it becomes a bit easier for you. Now, that is a level of empathy where you try and connect with a person rather than just sympathizing in a very external way of trying to make sure that their needs are being recognized. So this was, again, a very candid quote from one of the participants who was going through a visible disability. Uh, and again, I mean, this was something that came out from someone working in an organization. So obviously, they spoke at length about, what are the great things that organization does for them. But that level of empathy was something that was missing in the way the participant was being treated. Coming to the last two quotes that I want to share. Again, this is more the discord between organizations' belief and how the employees or the agile practitioners look at the same phenomena. Of course, there are these mandatory diversity training that are being that are coming through by the leaders of the organization. But I think the big question that all of us need to answer is, are the employees seeing value in that? Are the agile practitioners seeing that value add in attending these trainings? A lot of time what happens is, because we are forcing individuals to sit in a room, attend a training, they will do it for the sake of it. But then obviously they may not be that much engaged with the material. They may not imbibe that into their practices of day-to-day work that they're doing. And that is what this quote was all about, that there can be that element of resentment that gets built among the practitioner, among the individuals, when they are being forced to go through a particular agenda by the leaders. So I think a big question mark here: do leaders at all levels walk the talk? That's the question we have over here. And yeah, this is the last quote that I want to spend some time on. Again, this was quite candid in the sense that there are companies that are using quotas, but that is mainly to enjoy some tax incentives, or it is just part of the CSR or the SDGs, where they want to show to the external world that, hey, you know what, we are trying to be diverse, or we are trying to include a diverse group of people in our ways of working. But are they being respectful to Scrum? Because at the end of the day, uh, I mean, a lot of organizations we found were looking at Scrum mainly to reduce the time to market, to serve the clients better, rather than looking at it more in an inward way or being more respectful to the people that are already in it. So with that, these were pretty much the quotes that we wanted to discuss. This is a slide, I think it's more, I mean, the only thing I want to do here is just to smile at looking at this particular slide. What happens when an individual feels included? We have these great 5 things over here, and the impact that it does, again, definitely overpowers anything else. So I'm just going to leave this slide for all of you for, say, 20 seconds before we move on. over to you, Deanna. Maybe you want to talk about some quotes where people felt this way and what was the outcome that we saw.
Thank you, Ashay. Yes, so look, we had a lot of positive quotes as well, and this is what we wanted to share with you. And it was all around the being intentionally designing for inclusion and equity. And what we found with this quote was it was an example of how an organisation and Agile coaches consciously think about the diversity of the people attending their workshops in advance and design for inclusion. And understanding people's communication preferences helps to drive a result where the diversity of thought can be used to build these innovative solutions. So giving the example that Ashay said earlier, then it would be thinking about how we want to pull in information from others who may not be able to just think on the spot. The next quote is from a woman I actually spoke to, and she was just so passionate. She was based in the US, and this company had been proactively sourcing for a diversity of talent. And they also had a culture of learning. And I think that that's one of the key things, that the organisation is not just looking at it from one end about how you get people in, they're also thinking about how you develop and retain employees. And this woman was talking about how she was set up for success, how she had the opportunity to learn Agile because she didn't come from an Agile background, and then how she was given promotion and different opportunities to work with people, and her personal satisfaction and that employee engagement and employee experience that so many CEOs are driving for. These are the types of things that we really need to be thinking about from an equity perspective to get people into organisations and to actually keep them. And another quote that really sort of stood out for me and the research team, because DE&I is often thought about from an employee perspective. But we actually should be thinking about DE&I from a customer, a product, a service perspective, because otherwise we're just missing out on so many opportunities if we're only ever designing for the majority or for what I think that I need, that I think that customers need. So this quote is about saying, this team actually took the lens of diversity, equity, inclusion, and they built a new feature in their payroll system. So it now means that from a drop-down box, you can select whether you're a male, a female, or a non-binary person. And that's really important in this modern day and age where we've got global companies and global organisations. And it really makes us think about how we need to really be considerate and conscious about our design. So now I'm going to hand back to Ashay, because this is a really important slide to talk about DE&I through your organisation.
Yeah, now again, at this stage, I'm sure all of you must be wondering, what are the opportunities that this present? Through these quotes, we have pretty much established, the two sides of the coin. What happens when people feel excluded versus when people feel included? But then what are the opportunities within your organization that you can look at? So it starts all the way it starts all the way up from the business strategy, the way it has been defined. And I think, that's where it has to flow all the way within the organization, in the sense that, do we have a business strategy that intentionally brings in the elements of DEI? If that is the case, then obviously you will have leaders that are aligned to that strategy, and then leaders will try and role model their desired behaviors, and they will then drive this element of empathy within the organization. So it starts all the way from business strategy, flows to the leadership, and then it comes into how we are redesigning our systems the way they currently are. So that is the entire systems thinking approach that we are talking about, where we design thinking about inclusion and equity for everyone that are working within an organization. And once we have the systems in place, that is when the people opportunities will come in, where we'll start to create better opportunities for all the employees. And they can obviously learn together, they can obviously grow together, but that is when the people opportunities will really come in. So I think to reach that fourth point on this particular slide, the first three elements are absolutely a must, and that is where it has to start. And that will eventually be a win-win for everyone involved in the organization. And obviously, needless to say, when there are more opportunities for people, when they feel included, they are growing, they are learning, that will result in innovation. And once innovation happens, all of us know there is better product, better services, And that will eventually lead to better business results as well, where the clients are happier, the communities are happier, and overall you are pretty much seeing the entire life cycle of how an organization operates, right from the top to everyone who is working in an organization. So this is what we want to, this is, I think, again, a very important slide in the sense that if any of you are wondering what can I take back from this session? What is it that I can look to do within my organization? This is pretty much like a roadmap that can be followed if one is trying to achieve DEI within an agile organization. So with this, I'm just going to hand it over to Deanna to talk about our key recommendations from the report around what can be done apart from following this particular roadmap.
Thanks, Ashay. So as part of our research, we actually asked our participants for recommendations and how we should be going about this differently. And our research team comes from ourselves, a diverse mix of people from different experiences in agile organizations and different disciplines, and we came up with all of this. So I'm really wanting you to reflect now, and hopefully we're going to inspire you with some of these ideas that are coming through. Really importantly, I think there's something in here for everyone. So please stay tuned. So firstly, we want to talk, our recommendation is for the Agile community and influencers that are on here on the call today. We're really looking to redesign the Agile ways of working. And so we're wanting to think about how DE&I actually becomes a key part of Agile ways of learning. We know that we're going to need to get into the ears of the industry bodies, because we're going to have true sustainable change, we're going to need to see that change flow through from Agile frameworks and resources and certifications. So as an example, the co-founder, Evan Laybourne, is actually having discussions now with different groups such as Agile Alliance and Scrum Alliance to look at how DE&I can be incorporated. So stay tuned, you'll hear more from us on that space. Secondly, for organisations, this is about that systems thinking approach, about how you can actually serve not only your employees but your customers in a better way. And there's a number of different ideas, because we often will just go about and try and fix one thing, fix this one little thing, and then not look at the big picture, and then not realize if we only fix one thing, it's not going to solve the upstream or the downstream problems. So we've put a few examples on the screen now. So it is around looking at equity for pay, for performance, for development opportunities. Who are you always giving those promotions to, giving the pay increases to, and looking at how you do performance. We should really be thinking as well with flexibility. It's got to be designed for the various needs of employees, not just the majority. In terms of how you source and attract candidates, and I think we'll hear more about that in a bit later, but really importantly, you can source the most diverse candidates, but if you don't have an inclusive workplace, you will not keep them. I have seen that time and time again in my experience as a HR consultant, and I've seen time again where companies only put that effort in up front and they don't think about the employees once they're in the organisation. And the third big call out, and hopefully we've got some product people on the call here, or at least people who can influence product and service design. We should be thinking about inclusion right from the start. There's been too many instances happening around the world where product design has not been thought about for all customers. So this is a big call out for everyone. The next one is around leaders and agile coaches. I mean, leaders, as everyone knows, has always had a key role to play in organisations, but agile coaches, I think, are absolutely critical, because you're on the ground in the detail with the teams, watching all these interactions every single day. And, you know, on the screen is telling us about what a good leader or coach can do. And, you know, you have the ability to help someone achieve great things, or absolutely kind of push them to the point that they want to leave an organisation. I think everyone knows this, but really importantly, I think the aspect of, surprisingly, diversity, equity, inclusion is not always there. So we're recommending, if you want to really think about how you can be a better leader or coach, learn more about DE&I. we're really wanting executives, they have to be able to demonstrate the culture that they're looking for in their organisation, and then what they wish their teams to model. And also we're wanting teams to think very deliberately about the cross-functional nature of teams. I think that's always been called out in Agile, but that doesn't seem to be happening all the time. And so if you really want those innovative solutions, that's a key element. And then finally, this is just for everyone. This is I hope we've kind of sparked a bit of your imagination here. And a call to everyone, a call to action. Use our Agile mindset. Like, we all think about Agile. We love Agile because it's collaborative. You can transparency, respect, honesty, open communication, pride in our work. Use that Agile mindset. Reflect on what you currently know. We all have our own biases, every single one of us, and that's absolutely fine. We're not telling you to stop having biases, but we're asking you to think and reflect about your biases. Talk about how this happens in your team. Every team and every organisation context is different. So your customers, your employees, your stakeholders, your suppliers, your cultural norms, your local laws, they're all going to be different. But think about what we've talked about today and how that might apply. And lastly, a personal call out. So what does this truly mean to you? And how do you want to show up at work? And how do you want to advocate for inclusion? And finally, I'd like to acknowledge that it's Pride Month this month, and we're celebrating it in June throughout the world. And so celebrations like this are really crucial to drive awareness. And so it's fantastic that as part of this meetup that we're being able to do that as well. So lastly, I'd like to say thank you again and leave you with this thought. How does this apply in your organisation? And hand over to Ashay.
Yeah, I think probably at this stage, it'll be interesting to hear perspective from Gautam as well regarding, how the sourcing, how the talent recruitment happens at his organization, and then probably he can share some anecdotes. That'll be interesting for everyone to hear.
Sure, great. Thank you, Ashay, and thank you for this opportunity.
Gautam, your volume is a little low. Can you come closer to the mic?
Is it better now?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you for the opportunity, Ashay, and a fantastic presentation there. There was a lot of places where I kind of resonated with some of the study that was put up there, right? I think the first one is I will talk to you a little bit before I get to talent acquisition and what we do about attracting DE&I. I think I'll just talk about a few things that I resonate with in this particular slide, and then probably go to that. First and foremost, I think I love the whole fact about rushed into expressing your opinion. And I think what has really happened is I've had this experience on my team where we would have stand-ups in the morning. We would try and talk about numbers, how to change things in talent acquisition. And then I would, after 2 hours of the meeting happened, I would get a few people come up to me and say, hey, but you know what, this is what I was thinking through. And if I did ask them, why didn't you talk about it in the huddle? They probably said that it didn't strike them back then. So what we've really done for that is, and the kind of ideas they would come up with was phenomenal, and we didn't want to miss out on encashing on these ideas, right? So what we did is before we had our morning huddles, we started at least one day prior or a few hours prior to this huddle, we started publishing the agenda and what we were going to talk about, so that people really came back with better ideas, right? So that was one thing that we did. And I was just reading the other day about a luxury brand of cars, which were designing a new set of cars, and they did not really have a diverse team. And the huge difference of having a diverse team is this luxury car, when they had designed it for people for at least drivers mostly men, because they designed it with ashtrays and a cigarette lighting mechanism in the car. But when a woman was added to this team, she took a drive in the took a drive in the car, and when she got out of the car, she said, "Hey, everything is great about the car, but I didn't have place to keep my clutch or my purse. So while there was place enough to keep a cigarette box or an ashtray or a lighter, but there was no place to keep my my purse in there. So it's very important to have a diverse team. So it's a very famous case study which is making the round. So it is something you can always go ahead and read. And the third part is, of course, when it comes to talent attraction of the DE&I folks, one thing that we do is, of course, sensitize the teams, and we sensitize the teams whether or not we are hiring anybody from the community or anybody who is woman or man. We still go ahead and sensitize the team, because it is important to do it whether we are hiring anyone from the community or not, because the minute you start hiring, if you go ahead and start sensitizing the team, then you're really outing the person from the community, right? So we don't really do that specifically when we're hiring someone, but we do it in general, and that's a practice that we hold. And that's important because when somebody joins, at least your teams know how to react to the person who's joined, and does not necessarily have to act different to that person. So these are typically what we've done, and of course we don't call out. We don't want to call out, and it's totally the candidate's perspective whether they want to declare about their gender or about their sexual orientation to their colleagues. But as an organization, we don't talk about it openly to at least the teams that they are getting into.
Hey, this was like really insightful, actually. I first of all, thank you so much, because at the end of the day, when I look at the recommendations and you say Agile coach can make a difference, makes me feel very proud, because I am a coach at heart and will remain probably a coach all my life. And it makes me feel good that there is something I can bring in. Your recommendations gives me that confidence. And I'm sure there are a lot of coaches on the here in the participants as well who are feeling very proud, and a good takeaway there. We already have a few questions flowing in, so maybe I'll just jump into the question. In fact, Gautam, you have a question even before you started talking, but I'll probably have a question with the research team before. There is a question on 26% felt that they felt exclusion with agility in practice. That was something I'm sure. I think that must be from a coach, which caught the attention. So do you have any insights which practices actually, because 26% is a huge number, which practice probably is contributing to feeling exclusivity or feeling of exclusion in that space? Ashay, Deanna.
Ashay, do you want me to go first or you?
Yeah, Deanna, you can go first. I'll share anecdotes,
Sure,
but yeah, you can
sure.
talk about it first.
I mean, just to answer, it wasn't just one particular practice, but if we give some examples, I think the classic example is the stand up or the huddle. And not only is it all about, the ability and how you talk, but it is even the fact about what time do you decide to have your huddle. And so often participants mentioned, they would be right during the time that it was time to take your child to school, or the meeting would be held right when I'm supposed to be cooking the dinner. And so we're finding actually that there was just the timing of the agile practices might be happening. Ashay, you've probably got some other examples.
Right. Yeah. I mean, adding to what Deanna said, again, I mean, if we look at Agile, it's a very visual way of working. Be it the post-it that you have on a wall if you're working in an office, or currently we are all working in a distributed mode, but still we have a particular board that we are referring to day in, day out, in terms of how stories are progressing, how cards are being moved from one state to another. Now, that is something where we take it for granted that everyone is comfortable doing. Of course, I mean, the classic example will be someone with a visible disability. Obviously, that is a person who is not too happy with this visual way of working. But again, that is the more obvious group that I'm talking about. There could be other groups in it. For example, again, some of the not so external elements, say, the whole idea around introverts versus extroverts. Someone who is an introvert may feel that, look, I'm just out there in the open. My cars are there for everyone to be seen how they are being moved. And then, maybe they don't feel comfortable with that level of scrutiny day in, day out. So again, I think the net, it all boils down to understanding the teams that we are working or the teams that we are coaching. What is the individual perception? What are the groups of people that are forming the team? And then we try and design our practices accordingly. So as I said, it is a very context-driven phenomenon. For one team, it might work out brilliantly, but for the other team, this visual way of working might be very difficult to comprehend. And I think that is where the coaches can come in, where if you are looking at a specific group of people, there has to be an effort to understand that group better at an individual level. And then you say that, hey, look, here are the practices that I want to talk about. So that level of, from my end, the example is more around the way, it's a very visual way of looking at things. And yeah, the other example I think Deanna has already covered around the element of daily stand-up. I mean, that's something that, people do feel either the timing doesn't work or the way it is designed.
Yeah. Thank you.
I might just add another point too that's really sprung to mind. I think the idea of retrospectives and the practice of saying, well, we have to say things, but then if the team doesn't feel safe enough or they're worried about the impact is if they honestly say what's not working, they can themselves then feel like they get excluded from further meetings because they're speaking out of turn, etc. So there's probably quite a lot of different elements, and it does just require some bit of reflection as an agile coach or individual in a team. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Deanna. Thanks for adding those points. Absolutely. I also feel that, and that's where some of the coaches, some of us, we ask actually, is this even adding value to you doing these practices? I think that's the way we should start our question is the daily stand-up adding value to each one of you, not just as a team holistically, but each one of you, and what can we do better? So a retrospective on the practices itself, not just the delivery, but on the practices itself is much needed today, especially from the coach's side. Thank you. Gautam, thank you for that automobile experience that you shared. In fact, I also was coaching in one of the automobile Volvo, and they said even just they got a left-hander in the team to do the testing, and he said this is completely designed for a right-handed person, and my anatomy is completely designed left-handed. Especially the bikes, right? The light and the horn, everything is right-handed. My brain doesn't work on right-handed side at all, so I can never drive these cars. And so diversity even starts with maybe something as simple as right-handed and left-handed things also within the gender. So a question for you, very interesting. Hiring DI candidates is challenging, but the more challenging is keeping them truly inclusive, especially in the non-office working hours like coffee areas, lunches, dinners, and office parties. How do you, as an HR, create an environment to keep them inclusive, not just in the delivery work, but a little more as the fun part of the work as well?
Yeah, so I think the biggest part of it is sensitization, and while you quoted over there, probably hiring is not the more difficult part of it, but it is the inclusivity. But also, it's important to note that while hiring, don't hire the person because it's a tick in the box, because that's when your teams are going to be agitated. That's when the person's going to be agitated because you've hired the person just to increase the number of people from a diversity standpoint. If you can show your teams the purpose of having this person in the team, I think everybody is going to be fine with it and kind of will be okay with getting the person on the team and probably having decent conversations. But sensitizing the team is very important. So it is important for them to understand how to address this person person and all those different things. So it's very important to sensitize the team where you're hiring maybe a DEI person. So that's going to play an important role. And like I said earlier, sensitizing doesn't happen after you hire this person. It can happen even before, or it can happen every year as a part of your company's practice. So that's going to be very crucial when you're building an inclusive team. And of course, you build ecosystems around DEI. DEI could include transgender as well. So even bathrooms which are non-gender specific and stuff like that is very important to build. So you start from sensitizing teams way before you start hiring for them. So that's quintessential.
I think this question from Mahesh is actually a continuation of what you said just now, Gautam. I'll probably open it to all the panelists and would like to hear your thoughts. One of the challenges by promoting inclusion and diversity is companies are now bringing in a quota system, like exactly what you said, a tick mark, right? Quota system when it comes to recruitment and promotions. When we don't get a suitable candidate, there is a willingness to compromise on the quality of the diversity candidate, while there are other deserving candidates, probably not in the DEI bracket, right? So what has been your experience in this regard? So maybe from a research point from both of you and from a practical perspective from your point of view, all three of you, it would be great to hear your thoughts. Ashay, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So again, that's an interesting question, Padma, in the sense that, this has always been a topic of debate. Does the fight for diversity, equity, inclusion, take away the battle from the fight for equality? Are we compromising on the fight for equality if we are bringing in this DEI perspective? Again, and I know this is a topic of debate. There are no right answers here, but my personal opinion is the answer is a resounding no, in the sense that there are enough processes in place where companies are being careful about the people they are selecting to work within an organization. And this is not about saying we compromise on those systems or we compromise on those processes. Now, of course, the quota element is something that is questionable, in the sense that, what is the percentage we're talking about? But what I have seen with certain organizations, they are being very careful with that percentage, like what percentage of their employees are from a specific community. So they are being very careful about designing that percentage. So my short answer to this, as long as the percentages are defined clearly, they are something that that doesn't compromise that entire fight for equality, then I think it's a win-win for everyone. But of course, the moment we take up that percentage to say something which is very alarming, then there is an argument to be had that are we getting in the best candidate for our organization?
Gautam, do you want to add something before we go back to the research?
Yeah. I just think that we shouldn't put a number against DEI. One is again, the quota system, I don't believe. I think it should be we hire for talent, and we rather interview for diversity and hire for talent. So that should be the motto we go after. But I think if you hire in a quota system, even the candidate who comes into that seat is going to feel a little demotivated because he got that role or she got that role because of the quota system. So I would suggest that companies don't do that. And okay, I don't know how are we deciding on that quota itself, because I don't think so you should treat them any different than other people, and why should you put them in a certain number? So I think that needs to be ambiguous even while you're hiring. You shouldn't know which community the person is from, really, because that itself is a bias.
Deanna, you have been a HR researcher and researcher.
Yes.
What's your take?
Look, in Australia, we don't have quotas, but what we do very heavily have is targets. And generally, we've only have targets on things such as having more women or
Deanna, did you freeze, or is it only me?
Yeah, I think it's Deanna.
It's Deanna. Okay.
Yes.
Let her come. I would like to wait for her to come and complete this answer, but in the interest of time, we have one more question time. Oh, okay, Deanna is back. Yeah, go ahead, Deanna.
Am I back? Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Sorry,
Thank
sorry. Okay, so I'm not sure where we got to, but in Australia we don't have quotas, but we have targets. And so companies often have targets for women, for underrepresented groups, but often the challenge is because people don't want to actually be known as that underrepresented group. So I would actually put the challenge to people to say, that we should be thinking about the type of person that we want to bring in and not judging them by the color of their skin or their sexuality, but thinking about it from a capability perspective. And often when I work with hiring managers, they for some reason think that they have to have the unicorn person, the person who is never going to have every aspect. And I would say to them is let's look at the diversity and the strengths of your current team. What does everyone have? What are those skill sets that you don't quite have? And then think about, do you need to hire someone who has 10 years experience? Or actually, are you willing to take someone who's only have 1 year and then you're going to pair them with someone else who can help train them up? And I think if we start putting a different mindset onto how we can do this, then we can find those people that then may make those targets or quotas up. But it's the way we go about it, because you never want to be, and I have been that person, being told that I got hired because I'm a woman. And that's just makes you feel terrible. So that's why I think that the problem with quotas is very dangerous, and we need to have a lot more thought towards it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I remember this, let me not name the companies, but a couple of companies, even on LinkedIn, I have seen saying diversity candidates only. Why? Right?
Wow.
So, and one of my friends called up this month is a Pride Month, a diversity month, and she said, Padma, why don't you apply? This is diversity drive going on, and you will surely get this role if you apply. I said, I don't want to apply this month. I'll apply next month maybe. So this is so derogatory, actually, even for someone like us, like saying, hey, apply this month, you'll surely get the job. I want to get it when everybody is applying for it, right? So actually, those are some sensitive things that I think Gautam was talking about, saying diversity candidates only. I think we need to remove those words, not on at least platforms like LinkedIn. They cannot promote something like that. Okay, we have time for one last question, and maybe Deanna, you could start and we could go ahead on the panel and end this. How can we respectfully accommodate DE&I in the current situation of remote working? Because we don't get to bring people, see people. So how can we do this respectfully? Going forward, I think the work life is going to more or less remain like this. 30-40% of our work life is going to be remotely working. How do we do that?
Sure. I think firstly, as leaders and I'll put as Agile coaches, we can't just assume that the way that I like to work is going to be the same as what my team likes to work. So I always would say start by asking your team about what their preferences are. Recognize that we're going to have to need a different combination. I'm making some generalizations. The extroverts want to go back into the office. Maybe some of the parents who have their children at home also might want to go back into the office a couple of days. But then at the same time, also be aware that not everyone wants to have their cameras on for 10 hours a day. Not everyone wants to work in the same type of way. And we need to be intentionally respectful and caring. I want to add the care element in here. I think we sometimes forget that we're all humans and we just need to care for each other and recognize that we're all going through very challenging times, especially now with COVID. Ashay.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just keep it very short. If anything, I feel it only levels the playing field in the sense that none of us are there in flesh and blood in front of the other person. It's all there in front of a camera, or in some cases, not even in front of a camera. So I think it does bring that element to the coaches, to the leaders as well, that now you're not dealing with a person in flesh and blood, you're dealing with someone who is there working on a laptop. And if the contextualization can happen, understanding the team can happen, then practices can be defined accordingly.
Yeah, Padma, and to add from my perspective, I think this is a fantastic opportunity, specifically because in the past we probably all had to go to offices, but now we can attract a lot more DE&Is, across the country. Like it could be tier 2, it could be a lot of remote locations where people could not work from, and now everybody has the access to work in a multinational or a startup sitting in the comforts of their houses. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity, and a lot of us need to make use of this opportunity. I just feel this is a huge boon which we get from the pandemic.
Yeah, I know that's one of the very few things that have happened in the right direction from the pandemic is one, every company has realized that nothing stops working from home.
Yeah.
And a good level setter, like Ashay said, this may be a good level setter for everybody to be comfortable. And then once the comfort level comes in, coming back to office is not a big deal at all. So yeah, thank you so much. I think we are just 1 minute past, and thank you so much. I don't want to take more time from any of you. Participants, you know our YouTube channel, subscribe there so you can go back and see this recording as well as the past recordings. And you can also become a member of the LinkedIn group for the BAM Bengaluru so you can see what next. So next month, wait for the July, what we are going to announce, who are we coming back with for the July session. And until then, enjoy, work from home, be safe, be healthy, and don't forget to have fun. Thank you.